$175 billion. That's the total amount approved by the US Congress to support Ukraine since the war began in 2022. According to figures from the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, and the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, CRFB. This is not just a dry financial number, but a powerful strategic statement reflecting the unprecedented depth of US involvement in a modern European conflict. A huge number, larger than the GDP of many developing countries, far exceeding the US federal education budget for many years combined. A country where every expenditure on the poor, on health, on education is a never-ending debate, can easily approve hundreds of billions of dollars for a war half around the world. So in the end, what benefits do the United States and the majority of American people actually receive? Or is it only a small group that benefits? Welcome back to Economy Roads. Let's dive into the analysis of the topics mentioned above in today's video. Are you ready? Let's get started.
According to a report from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, CRFB, as of early 2025, the U.S. Congress has officially approved a total of $175 billion in emergency aid to Ukraine. This amount is not just an abstract number, it is clearly divided and has a purpose. About $117 billion has been allocated for defense systems, including weapons, ammunition, air defense systems, unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, and training and technical support programs of that amount. Approximately $66 to $68 billion has been disbursed directly by the Pentagon through contracts with major U.S. defense contractors such as Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics, and others. This means U.S. tax money has been converted into contracts to produce strategic weapons, HIMARS, Javelin, Patriot, F-16, etc., to support Ukraine. Additionally, as of March 14, 2025, 68% of the $182.8 billion in aid was security assistance. According to USA Facts, nearly $124 billion of the total was earmarked for military purposes. In fiscal year 2023, the Pentagon disbursed $12.1 billion through the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, USAI, a key component of military aid coordinated by the U.S. Department of Defense. USA Facts data also shows that $83 billion of that amount has actually been spent, including contracts, equipment deliveries, support services, and personnel not merely allocated on paper. So where did the $170 billion US dollars poured into Ukraine actually go? The answer may surprise many. Most of it did not go directly to Kyiv. Instead, most of it stayed in the US. Nearly 70% of the $175 billion in US aid to Ukraine since 2022 was spent in the US, or on US forces, according to a study by the American Enterprise Institute published in May 2024. Specifically, most of the military budget was used to sign contracts with US defense contractors. Familiar names such as Lockheed Martin, Raytheon Technologies, RTX, Boeing Defense, Northrop Grumman, and General Dynamics. This is a familiar pattern in U.S. military aid packages. Weapons are manufactured, assembled, and tested in the U.S., then transferred to Ukraine under the aid program. For example, the HIMARS High Mobility Rocket Artillery System manufactured by Lockheed Martin is considered a symbolic weapon in the war in Ukraine. Stinger and Patriot air defense missiles, Javelin anti-tank missiles, 155mm artillery shells are all included in the multi-billion-dollar orders that the Pentagon signed with U.S. corporations. Thousands of Stryker and Bradley armored vehicles were also ordered from General Dynamics and BAE Systems to aid Ukraine. So how have these corporations benefited? Since 2022, when the war began, the stock prices of U.S. defense giants have skyrocketed. Raytheon Technologies, RTX, has increased by more than 40%, from $100 to more than $140 in just 1 year. Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman have both recorded increases of 10% to 30% depending on the time. Quarterly revenue set a new record, with backlog, that is the number of undelivered orders, amounting to tens of billions of dollars. For example, by the first quarter of 2025, Lockheed Martin reported $18 billion in revenue, up 4%. Raytheon Technologies reached a record of $80.7 billion in revenue for 2024, marking an increase of more than 17%. Northrop Grumman held $92.8 billion in backlogged orders, equivalent to more than 2 years of production. In other words, the war in Ukraine is not just a gunfight on the battlefield, it is also a golden springboard for the US defense industry, bringing a cash flow back to production lines in Texas, Virginia, or Alabama. That is the other front, silent, but the profits are louder than the gunfire. In other words, the war in Ukraine is not just a gunfight on the battlefield, it is also a golden springboard for the US defense industry, bringing a cash flow back to production lines in Texas, Virginia, or Alabama. That is the other front, silent, but the profits are louder than the gunfire. All this is done through two main support mechanisms. Presidential Drawdown Authority, PDA, allows the president to transfer weapons directly from the military stockpile. That is, the goods are already there, just sign the papers. And SHIP, Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, USAI, allows new orders from US manufacturers, creating new contracts with huge value. To put it in perspective, a Tomahawk, a cruise missile manufactured by Raytheon, costs about $2 million. The HIMARS system, made by Lockheed Martin, is priced around $10 million. Each round of aid can include hundreds of weapon systems, with a total value reaching $1 to $2 billion per disbursement. In other words, every time a missile is launched, millions of budget dollars are pumped back into the US defense industry. While the United States continues to allocate substantial funding to its military, with a record $886 billion defense budget for fiscal year 2025, concerns are growing over how this emphasis impacts domestic priorities. This defense budget represents one of the largest peacetime military expenditures in US history. Yet, at the same time, many core social programs are facing challenges. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, KFF, as of early 2024, more than 19 million Americans have been disenrolled from Medicaid as states resumed eligibility redeterminations following the COVID-19 pandemic. This situation has disproportionately impacted low-income families and children. Education funding continues to face stagnation or structural challenges in several states, despite rising costs and student population shifts. Meanwhile, key federal anti-poverty programs such as SNAP, food stamps, and HUD housing assistance have experienced flat or declining real dollar funding in recent years, even as inflation and housing costs have surged, according to Center on Budget and Policy Priorities 2023. These contrasts raise important questions, not necessarily about America's overall fiscal capacity, but about its budgetary priorities. As some analysts have noted, such decisions can be seen as favoring defense contractors and strategic interests abroad, rather than addressing the pressing needs of everyday Americans. During the May 2022 vote on the $40 billion aid package to Ukraine, Senator Josh Hawley objected, stating, "This is not in America's best interests. It ignores domestic priorities such as border security, allows Europe to avoid responsibility, undermines vital interests elsewhere, and lacks meaningful oversight." In a December 2023 interview, Senator J.D. Vance said, "I really don't care what happens to Ukraine. What concerns me is that the leading cause of death where I live is fentanyl coming across the southern border from Mexico." Several prominent Republicans, including Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene, have publicly opposed continued aid to Ukraine, arguing that America cannot keep sending funds abroad, while many Americans struggle with basic needs like food and healthcare. This division is reflected not only in political debates, but also in public opinion. Some, particularly in urban areas with large immigrant populations and Democratic voters, strongly support aid to Ukraine, viewing it as crucial to stopping Russian aggression and protecting global democracy. Conversely, many Americans in rural and former industrial regions, such as the Rust Belt where factories have shuttered, question why they face job losses, school closures, and hospital shutdowns, while their tax dollars fund a distant conflict. Why are we losing our jobs? Our kids are missing school, our local hospitals are closing, while our tax dollars are being sent to a country halfway around the world. And the concerns are no longer limited to Ukraine. June 21st, 2025, the United States launched a series of airstrikes against Iranian targets in response to drone attacks on US bases in Iraq. Although the government called it an act of legitimate self-defense, for many Americans it was just another example of how military spending continues to take priority while pressing civilian issues are pushed to the back burner. June 22, 2025 at Embarcadero Plaza, San Francisco. A protest of more than 300 people organized by the Answer Coalition. They are not right-wing populists nor extremists. They are workers, students, teachers, people asking, "What is my money going to?" The signs read, "Money for people's needs, not the war machine." We want healthcare, not harm. Not radical slogans, but voices demanding fair policies. Why is the health budget delayed when each round of military aid can cost $1 billion to $2 billion? Why are students still learning in classrooms with leaky roofs while HIMARS is packed up and shipped away? From small squares like San Francisco to tense hearings in Congress, one question is ringing not just in political circles, but in every middle-class household. As of now, the United States has allocated approximately $175 billion to Ukraine, a figure that is far from insignificant. Nearly 70% of this funding has gone to defense, weapons, military equipment, logistics, and training. The U.S. defense industry has surged, major contractors have reported record profits, stock values have soared, and tens of billions of dollars have flowed through military contracts. Ukraine has gained the strength and resources to sustain its war effort. But for many Americans, one question remains: what are we getting in return? In a country where over 40 million people rely on SNAP benefits to afford basic food, where millions of children attend underfunded and aging schools, and where many patients are forced to choose between medical treatment and paying rent, $175 billion isn't just a budget line. It is a political choice, one that reveals what the government chooses to prioritize: global strategy abroad or basic dignity at home. And in the end, if you're a taxpayer, you have every right, and perhaps even the duty, to ask, whose war is my money funding? And for what? If you have thoughts on all of this, let us know in the comments. And subscribe for more thoughtful analysis. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.